overall, I know that we speak a lot about creatives and how valuable that they are. Having creative differentiation is so important to unlocking the funnel. There's other things that we can touch on as well, but I was thinking it might be a sensible decision to spend some of this session talking about the different opportunities that we have in terms of how we bid on the platform, on the Meta platform, that is, so that I kind of like best kind of guide you guys through what that is, what it means for the algorithm, and additionally, what we can kind of take away from that. Okay, so I'll dive into this in a little bit more detail. And so when it comes to Facebook ads, we have different options available to us. Okay, we can essentially run on the default, which is highest volume, and I'll go through what each of these mean. Or we can take a kind of more manual approach, and those approaches kind of differ in what they can offer us, but overall, it's really important to know them so that you can understand what's going to be happening if you don't utilize them, if you do utilize them, and how that's going to impact what the algorithm is going to do. So I am going to share my screen now, and you should see my trusty whiteboard here, and I'm going to go through those. So the default that you have is called highest volume. So when you go to create a campaign, this will be on the campaign level, and if you select CBO, you'll be able to essentially edit these. CBO, you might know as Advantage Campaign Budget. So that's where you would find that. And you'll notice that by default, like all of your bid strategies will be on highest volume, which is not a bad thing. It is really important to know what it means, okay? Because quite often people will say certain things to me, which I'll kind of explain as we go throughout, and I'll think, well, there's a kind of misunderstanding of between what you want and what you're asking the algorithm to do. So when it comes to the bid strategy then of highest volume, much as the name suggests, we are trying to get the highest volume of purchases. Okay, the big misconception here is that highest volume must mean that they will come at the cheapest cost per purchase, okay, or cost per result. Okay, that is not necessarily the truth, and I will tell you why. So the idea that highest volume is not equal to having the, and the reason for that is that we have two things here: balance, and some of you might have heard me talk about this balance before, where we have efficiency, yeah, and we have spend. So the control that we have over efficiency and the control that we have over our spend. And this is true for lead gen and for ecom. So when it comes to efficiency, the metrics that we use to track those are stuff like our cost per result, yeah, or in a more kind of purchase frame, should I say, it would be ROAS, yeah, and so we've got cost per result, ROAS, that kind of thing that we're looking at in terms of efficiency, and we also have control of our spend, yeah. So are we scaling, or are we throttling back the spend? Do we need to spend 100% of it or not? Okay. And so if you are approaching with maximum control of the spend, you're going to find that there's a inverse relationship here. The more that you spend and the more that you control the spend, the lower your efficiency is going to become. Okay, so that starts with the amount that we're spending. So if we're spending 10,000 a day, then our efficiency is going to come down. Why? because if we consider the funnel, even just by the shape of it, what you'll find is that you will have a higher concentration of conversions down here. So we've got a higher concentration here, medium concentration here, a lower concentration here. So that means that in terms of conversions, we're going to have to show our ads more here, which means we'll be spending more because we're charged per impression. We'll be spending more here before we get a conversion than we will here, which is why you will typically see a better cost per result in your bottom of the funnel than like a pure cold top of funnel. Okay, and so that's why that's why efficiency goes down the more we spend. But also consider this: when we want to say, let's say we're spending $100 a day, $100 a day. If we say, Facebook, you need to spend $100 a day, whether it's profitable or not, to get me the highest volume of purchases, then Facebook is kind of forced to spend in and around the number of $100 a day, which now that is an interesting concept, because what we're talking about here is not just spend, but it's control of the spend. It's not just $100. It's the fact that we're saying it must spend $100. Okay, so this is going to become clear as we start delving into the others that aren't highest volume. So highest volume means that we want to get as many results as possible by spending our full budget. Okay, so we're still controlling spend there, because we're stipulating that you're going to have to spend the full budget, but try and get me as many purchases as you can. Okay, the highest volume of purchases. So this is where we start to identify that perhaps it isn't the best CPR, because there is another option that we can select that isn't highest volume. In fact, what we'll do here is we'll just shrink this and move it over, and we'll actually discuss the next one, which is a CPR goal. Okay, so CPR goals, you can select these. You might have even seen them on the ad set level, but you can select CPR goal on the campaign level and then put in whatever your CPR goals are on the individual ad set. And so when it comes to a CPR goal, what we're doing is we're saying to Facebook, we want our average CPR to be whatever I say it should be. Okay, and therefore we are starting to control efficiency more than we are spend. So some of you might be thinking, okay, what happens if we're saying that we need a certain CPR or a certain like RAT here? What is going to happen if we select this idea that we need to hit a certain CPR for Facebook? Well, that means that spend control comes down, meaning that we could set the spend at whatever we want to, but it's only going to spend when it thinks it can satisfy the CPR goal. So let's say I set my CPR goal at $20. The algorithm is only going to spend budget to show the ad when it thinks that it's going to show to someone who not only is going to convert, but they're going to convert at the goal, the CPR, the CPL, the CPP, whatever, of what we want to achieve, which here I've said being $20. So what you need to recognize here is that we're asking the algorithm to do different things. When we're asking it to do highest volume, it's just saying spend all the budget and get me as many results as possible. And with CPR goal, what we're trying to do is control how much we're spending by only showing our ads to the most dedicated people, or the people most likely to convert when shown an ad, and those people are going to be most likely to convert at the cost per result goal. So it's not just that they're going to convert, it's they're going to convert at the cost per result goal, because what we might find with highest volume is that we will be spending when the algorithm is confident that it can get a conversion. However, is it confident that it can show the ads to this person who's likely to convert profitably? The answer to that might be no. The answer to highest volume might be that it thinks it can get the conversion, but it isn't confident that it can do it profitably. Okay? And that's a big difference, because here the algorithm, and this is what a lot of people get confused on, they might be saying, well, why is the algorithm spending all the budget on the ad that isn't even the best ROAS or the best cost per purchase or the best cost per lead? A lot of the time, it thinks it can push a different ad that is just getting the most results at, maybe it might even be a good cost per result, but it might not be the best, or it might be bad cost per result and it might not be profitable. And the problem is that this highest volume is going to be a bid strategy that is going to try and spend all of the budget in order to try and get as many purchases as possible, not caring whether they're profitable or not. Okay, but that is just what you're asking the algorithm to do, and that might essentially result in some unprofitable purchases. On the flip side, you have cost per result goal, where it will only spend where it thinks it can get results close to that cost per result. Okay, so you see how we're starting to control our efficiency by setting a cost per result goal. However, the problem there, and this is where you need to recognize that Facebook is a tool, and what we have available to us are just tools. And so therefore, maybe a cost per result goal is best in one scenario, maybe highest volume is best in another. I'm not saying any is better than another. I'm saying that some are more appropriate at some times, depending on what you want to achieve, and that these are all tools. You know, if I need to hammer a nail, I'm going to use a hammer. If I need to screw a screw, I'm going to use a screwdriver. So, you know, it's not saying that all of these are better. One of these is better. It's saying that some are more appropriate given certain circumstances. And so when we start to control our efficiency by adding in a CPR goal, what we're going to do is sacrifice the amount we're spending, because we're saying to Facebook, only spend when you're confident you can get this. And it's going to, therefore, even if we give it $100, if it only thinks it can spend 50 of that, that satisfies in a way that satisfies the CPR goal, then it's only going to spend 50. So you could set your budget at 100, but it's only going to spend 50 day to day if it thinks it can achieve that. Okay, and so it's really important to notice that when you sacrifice your spend, your efficiency goes up, and vice versa. You sacrifice your efficiency using highest volume, and your spend can go up. Now, it is important to recognize that highest volume, we're talking about, when we're talking about efficiency, highest volume is important to recognize, because it might be getting more purchases at maybe the break even or just slightly below the break even, and that might be good for your business because you have serious lifetime value that you can add to that. Okay, and therefore it could be good to have the highest volume strategy. However, we could also put that to CPR goal being more profitable in the meantime, in the interim, in the short term. So CPR goals can, in theory, reduce your cost per result. However, there is another caveat to this. The caveat being that when it comes to CPR goals, there are two things that we want to consider. We do not want to just set this at the break even. Yeah, we don't want to just set this at break even, because a CPR goal is an average goal. And so therefore, if you beat the cost per result goal by $10 on the one result, then it is going to see that as license to spend that $10 saved on another one, and therefore you're going to end up averaging out to like your break even, and therefore you're actually accepting some like unprofitable results in there. So my recommendation here is if you are going to set this, it would probably be set at about 20% below your break-even cost per result goal, and that way, even if it does go above that, it really shouldn't be unprofitable for you. And so that's a good starting point, and you might have to adjust as you progress there. But hopefully that makes sense on CPR goals. Another thing to consider when we're talking about CPR goals is that it is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a perfect solution. And what do I mean by that? A CPR goal of $20, for example, does not mean that my CPR in real life is going to be exactly $20. In fact, it might vary. It might be better than that. It might be worse than that. But what you need to bear in mind is that just by setting the goal, it's not an automatic win that we're definitely going to achieve this. In fact, a lot of CPR goal kind of bidding is based on data, and that leads me on to another really important point. If you have got no data whatsoever, and you don't even, let's say you've got one purchase and your cost per purchase, just to bring it into a e-commerce reference that quite a lot of people should be like familiar with. If you've got one purchase and your cost per purchase is 1,000 right now, so really high cost per result. If your cost per result is 1,000, and then you say, oh well, you know, I want my cost per result to be $10. If the highest volume algorithm is finding you one purchase for a cost per purchase of 1,000, then the chances of the CPR goal being able to, you know, make that 100 times better is very unlikely, because there's no data from these purchases that suggests that there could be one for $10. Otherwise, highest volume would have found it, if that makes sense. Okay, so highest volume would have spent on someone who was likely to convert for $10 probably very early on. But the problem is that the result goal just can't, it's not a magic bullet. It can't just make things all of a sudden way better, especially if you have no data to work with. What it's going to do is, if you imagine a graph, well, you don't need to imagine, I'll draw one for you. Here's the graph, and here is your break even. Okay, so here's your break even point, and I'm just going to draw that as a line going through it. Okay, and therefore everything above this break even cost per result is unprofitable. So anything up here is unprofitable, and anything below it is going to be profitable because it's your break even cost per result. Imagine this was purchases, for example. You're getting cheaper purchases equals more profit. Okay, so the ways that these different bid strategies work is that highest volume will capitalize on as much as it can, and therefore it will go for some unprofitable ones and it will go for some profitable ones, and it will essentially just try and get as many results on this line as possible. Okay, it might end up being profitable overall, or it might end up being unprofitable overall. Yeah, that's how it works. Highest volume will spend as much budget as it can, trying to achieve these like as many purchases. What I'll do is I'll just kind of like draw a dot on them. Yeah, so essentially what highest volume is trying to do is it's trying to get as many of these green dots as possible. Okay, this differs from cost per result goal because, as I said, set your cost per result goal a little bit below your break-even CPR, and you're going to find that it's trying to essentially get more purchases that are on this cost per result goal, so cheaper, essentially. Yeah, cheaper results, and so it might not be getting as many green dots, but it's trying to get them for cheaper. Okay, that is how it's trying to work. Whereas with highest volume, it's just trying to get as many green dots as possible, whether they're profitable or whether they're unprofitable. Okay, whereas break-even CPR is just trying to get ones that suit this goal, this kind of like common thread that is running through the whole way. Now we're going to talk about another one beyond cost per result goal, because I feel like we've covered highest volume and cost per result goal in quite a lot of detail. What we're going to cover next is something called bid cap. Okay, so bid cap is the more strict version, and what I'll do is I'll just remove this graph, and then we can start looking at all of these next to each other. Okay, so we've got highest volume for when we want to get the most results. We've got a CPR goal for when we want to be specific about the cost per result we're getting, but we also have something called bid cap available to us. Let's just change that. So bid cap. What is bid cap? Bid cap is the strictest version that we have of controlling our efficiency. Yeah, so we're back to this relationship between efficiency and spend. So when we control our efficiency to the maximum, yes, we get a maximum amount of efficiency that we can expect, but we also get a lower amount of spend control, even lower than cost per result goal. Okay, and so what you find is that with highest volume, if we put efficiency and spend here, for example, we can maximize our spend here, but we get the lowest amount of efficiency. With a CPR goal, what we find so here is that we get more efficiency and less spend. And with bid cap, we can potentially dramatically reduce our control of spending, but our efficiency, theoretically, again, should go up as much as possible. And so how would you see that? You would see that by amount spent going down, or you would see your efficiency, so cost per result, so your efficiency would go up, meaning that cost per result would improve. Okay, and so here, bid cap. Let's talk about what that is in relation to the kind of graph that I was drawing earlier. So bid cap is a hard, it's more of a hard ceiling. Okay, so if I draw this line again, the example again of highest volume is just trying to get as many purchases, whether they're profitable or whether they're unprofitable. Cost per result goal is where we're setting an average that we want to achieve. So all our results should theoretically be along this average. Bid cap is a hard ceiling. So that means that if it's going to cost more than the bid cap that we set to perform that bid, it's not going to go over it. Yeah. So you start to see the difference with cost per result goal, because cost per result goal will go over it if it thinks it can average it out, whereas bid cap will never cross that line. Okay, it'll never bid that much if it doesn't think it can achieve those results. And so what you'll find is bid cap is really going to restrict the kind of spending, and theoretically it's going to improve your ROAS, however, or like your cost per result. However, again, really important that we remember the caveat here that data is going to be really important to determine how effective these are going to be, and that just because we put a bid cap or a cost per result goal on doesn't mean we're going to get the exact results that we set, just because it's a dynamic platform that we're using, and people are more complex than just numbers can predict. So just by setting a bid cap or a cost per result goal, it doesn't mean just because an algorithm has some confidence in it or confidence to bid on them that that person is going to go the whole way through the funnel and convert there and then. That's just not going to be the case. Okay, so that's a really important caveat to remember. So with bid cap, then what we do is we set a maximum amount that we are willing to bid auction, and then essentially what we do is we just allow that to spend. We allow those we allow the delivery algorithm to just who it wants to show the ad to, that is going to be within the bid cap or under them, should I say. And what's going to happen there is the ad will show to those people, and because you've set a strict bid cap, you're going to find that that is only going to show to theoretically more interested people, theoretically then improving your efficiency, so your cost per result. However, this this is like I say, it's a very strict version. It's even stricter than cost per result goal, and of course it's far stricter than highest volume, which is on the other end of the spectrum. So you should start seeing that it is a spectrum where we're talking about efficiency and we're talking about spend. So the question becomes, what do I want to do? Do I want to have as much efficiency as possible, or do I want to have as much control of my spend as possible? It's kind of up to you to decide where you fall on the spectrum. Okay, is it more important for me to spend as much as possible over here and get as many results as possible? So that would be highest volume, where we control the spend and we can scale on that. And it's up to you if you wanted to decide whether you're on the other end of the spectrum, where you're saying, no, I definitely need to be really tightly controlling my efficiency, where that's going to be more bid cap or like kind of territory. Now, it is important to remember that bid cap is more manual, requires more like looking at, and then I would say that cost per result probably ends up somewhere just left of center, maybe about here, and that would be your CPR goal. However, what I would say is that in my experience, so this is kind of like over 7 years experience, a lot of people will approach their marketing budget with set amounts, and they will really care about spending that full amount, whether that's going to be profitable or not. Certainly, and this goes for any like agency owners around there in the call. Certainly, a lot of agency owners need to be aware that you are beholden to certain clients on how much they spend. So, especially if you're working with a larger company who deal with marketing budgets, if that's one of your clients, quite often these larger companies will be given marketing budgets. So the marketing team will be given a marketing budget, and if you kind of like spend outside of that, so let's say you underspend, that can have repercussions that go into deciding marketing budgets in the future. So if you underspend, that could mean that you don't get that budget in the future. A concept that is that can go beyond marketing, just overall budgets when they're not adhered to. Of course, that will have repercussions. Now, if you're kind of more in control of the overall budget, maybe you own your own business, that kind of thing, you might be thinking, okay, well, I would rather be more in control of how much I spend, and therefore highest volume would be really important to you. Or maybe you think, I care about spending some, I have to be visible, but I want more than anything to be profitable. And so the result goal might be a more appropriate solution for you. And then it kind of harks back to what we were talking about on the call earlier, where we're saying this is all to do with Facebook having tools. Facebook ads itself is a tool, and it's just what is the most appropriate for you in kind of any given situation. Do you need to be spending as much as possible, or do you need to be more in control of your spending? And so it becomes a really interesting conversation. Often when I'll be mentoring people and they'll say, like, look, I'm on highest volume and I'm getting loads of purchases, they're just not profitable, okay? Or I'm getting loads of leads, they're just not at the level of profitability that I need them to be at. And to me, that shows like perhaps a gap of knowledge where they can learn, okay, well, highest volume is going to get me the highest volume results, but that's not necessarily what I need right now. And so you can start delving into stuff from there. An important note that I wanted to cover here is that scale is about here. Yeah. So we're talking about control and spend. So anything where we're trying to scale is not going to be possible on bid cap or cost per result goal. What we could do is we could maximize the value in terms of volume that these guys can give to us. However, that's going to be smaller in terms of the volume that they will generate than highest volume. So what you'll find is if scaling aggressively is the plan, and I've worked with startups before who have these startups have got like existing marketing budget that has been like generated through like maybe a Kickstarter campaign, that kind of thing, and they're coming at you with like millions of dollars of budget, and they're willing to just pour it in. You are going to struggle to do that on a cost per result goal or a bid cap goal, or maybe there's like minimum requirements for you to spend. Again, that's going to be harder to do when you're not on highest volume, because on highest volume you can guarantee that Facebook is going to be trying to spend all of your money, whereas cost per result goal and bid cap by definition control that spend. They want to limit the amount that you're spending, whereas highest volume is kind of, that's on you to say how much you want to spend. And so if you're trying to spend like 40 grand a month, chances of you being able to do that on bid cap or cost per result goal is going to be like slim. So you need to start looking at, again, the right tool for the job. On the flip side, just to kind of give you an idea of what you can achieve with bid cap and CPR goals, sometimes you can set these like CPR goals or bid caps to whatever you want them to be, whatever level you want them to be at. And then what you can do is you can inflate the budget. So you can make the budget a lot higher than you usually would to kind of indicate to the algorithm that you're willing to spend whatever, as long as it satisfies the goal or the cap. And what you'll find is, and this is something that kind of carries over to Google a little bit as well, when we're talking about targets and goals there, you can find that a really nice place to be is where you have an essentially unlimited budget that you're willing to pour into something like a cost per result goal or a target ROAS, that kind of thing. It's a really great place to be where you can essentially have unlimited budget. So you give your budget loads of headroom, you inflate it a lot, and you just let your target do the controlling of the spend for you. So you have this like big treasury of budget that you're willing to spend, but there's a little gatekeeper on it that says, okay, well, we'll only spend this large sum or like parts of this large sum if we're convinced that it's going to be satisfying the goals we set in place. And so you find that a cost per result goal, or on Google it could be a target ROAS, can be a really good way of controlling the amount you spend. Remember, because we're sacrificing the amount that we can spend, but by essentially controlling our efficiency and letting our efficiency throttle the algorithm. So when we think about throttling the algorithm, which is going to lead on to the next point, when we're talking about throttling the algorithm, we're essentially saying highest value is wide open. Yeah, anyone who's might convert is allowed through. It's almost like having a security guard. It's almost like having a security guard, or like kind of knights at the gates, almost, where you're only going to allow certain people in if they fit the parameters. So highest volume opens the gates fully. Throttle is completely open. Whereas when you start to have a cost per result goal, you start to throttle more. And when you have a bid cap, you throttle even more. And so what you'll find is you're really controlling who can come through these gates. Yeah, how much you're throttling the algorithm. Now, some of the people who have maybe dealt with this before, or maybe can see a few steps ahead of what I'm about to say, might notice that what about if we throttle the algorithm so much that nobody comes through? Well, that means, and this is one of the problems with bid cap and cost per result goal, is that if we're too strict, or if we don't have enough data that suggests we can achieve these things, then they won't spend. Okay, and that is a problem because you are sacrificing control of spend for more efficiency. But the problem is you've sacrificed all of your ability to spend because you don't have enough data that suggests that you could hit that goal or hit that bid cap or deliver to those people and generate a result. So that's where highest volume kind of needs to be used because you can't run on that way. And so here, if we're kind of like keeping up the idea of this spectrum where we've got scale here, we actually have like $0 spend here. Yeah. And that can be a real negative because it means that we're not even showing our ads because we've too tightly throttled. As you start to throttle, you start to choke the algorithm and the ability for that data to pass through. And the problem is if you completely throttle it, and you get 0 going through, and so there's no data passing through there, and that becomes a problem because if no data is passing, then everything's kind of like not working, and you're not getting the results that you are intending to make. And so when we're looking at highest volume cost per result goals and bid cap, it's really important to recognize that sometimes it's not the right thing to go for the best cost per result goal or the best bid cap. Sometimes you need highest volume, and sometimes it's not the best thing to go with highest volume if you are finding that you're using highest volume right now and it's not working. Indeed, if you find that typically you get loads of results and they're just not quite cost effective enough, to me, that is a sign to really try cost per result goal. Yeah. Bid caps are a little bit different because bid caps are so strict that you are really throttling the algorithm there, and it could mean that you are essentially sacrificing too much. Okay. I would recommend if you are really interested in by testing these, I'd actually recommend going for it on a CPR goal. If you're not achieving it, maybe even then go stricter towards bid cap. But it's really important to remember that with bid cap, we are sacrificing a lot of spend and a lot of ability to do so. And so you end up in a scenario where you are on spend, and for that to be worth it, the efficiency has to be considerably higher. Now, the thing with CPR goal is it's kind of like it's not quite a happy medium as we've kind of discussed here. It's slightly left of center, but what you will find is that if you go straight from highest volume to bid cap, you perhaps don't learn as much as you would along the way as going from highest volume to cost per result goal, and then you can try some bid cap stuff. Like I say, whenever I do bid cap or CPR goals, what I like to do is inflate the budget to make sure that there's no pacing issues that can essentially ruin the chances of spending. Because what you might find is really early on in the day, if you don't have a huge budget and you have a CPR goal or a bid cap, you might find that it might not want to spend even in a way that satisfies the algorithm there, just because it's got more to spend along throughout the day. So I think that if I was recommending bid cap and CPR goal to people, I would be saying you probably want to inflate your budget there. I know that a lot of people, and this isn't necessarily my advice, but a lot of people will go with 50 times the CPL or something like that per day, and then they'll just set these bid caps at whatever they'll set, whatever's appropriate for them. Some people will go 3 times. Some people will go 10 times. Depends on how aggressive you want to be, I suppose. But essentially, and of course what you're selling. But essentially, it's really important to recognise that these bid caps and these CPR goals, because they're going to limit the amount that you are going to spend, they require you to inflate your budget so that you can kind of get closer to the amount that you could be spending on highest volume. However, like I say, there's no guarantee that would happen because it's all based on data, and these bid strategies are ways of kind of telling the algorithm what to focus on. Okay, so for a bid cap, what we're saying is here's the graph, and here's like our break-even level of profitability. For bid cap, we're saying never exceed this line in terms of what we're going to bid. That wasn't a very straight line. That's better. So we're saying, oh, never exceed that line. So it's only going to bid down here, yeah. But it's probably not going to bid as much as a highest volume one will, and that's where the spend comes from because we're bidding to show our ad. Okay, so what I might do here is just draw like a couple of lines just showing how that would work. Then we've got a cost per result goal, which I've said you'll want to set that at just below break even, maybe like 20% below break even. And then that way, what you'll find is that it will try its best to achieve results under or like averaging around whatever you select the cost per result goal to be. So if you set it at 20, it's going to try and achieve 20. If it achieves one at 15, it will try and get another one at 25, and it tries to average it out. Okay, because it's assuming that that's what you want because that's what you told it that you want. You want that goal. Okay. With highest volume, again, I'm just going to draw it here for you. We've got the highest volume one, and this is here's your break even, and essentially it's just going to try and get as many purchases as possible. Yeah, and so if you consider each corner a purchase, what it's going to try and do is just get as many of these as possible. So whether it's unprofitable, which would be anything here, or whether it's profitable, being anything here, it's just going to try and get as many of those as possible. It doesn't matter to this bid strategy whether that's profitable or not. And this is why you can sometimes find that the highest spender or the one that gets the most results inside your ads is not actually profitable, or it's not actually the most profitable. You might have like 2 ads, or like one ad that's got 2 purchases, and then another ad that's got 100 purchases, but the one that's got 2 purchases is more profitable in terms of like ROAS, or cost per purchase, or cost per lead, and that is all because that this one's getting pushed because it thinks it can get the highest volume of purchases here, or leads here, or results here. Yeah, it's trying to get results, whereas the others are actually more concerned with the costs that we're spending on results. So these are more results focused, and this is more spend focused. And so having this, like being armed with this knowledge, can be really valuable to you so that you know what the right tool is as you move forward. Now, I would say 80% of the time, highest volume is going to be the right approach for most people. However, that 20% of the time where you need to be using cost per result goal can be the difference between being profitable overall and unprofitable overall, because it might just be that you're using the wrong tool for the job. And I would say if you are achieving a lot of results and you are concerned about the profitability, then highest volume is probably something that you're going to want to experiment away from. You're going to want to try CPR goal and bid cap. Yeah. If you're struggling to get any results at all, throttling the algorithm is not going to help you. Okay, because there's not enough data to suggest that you can hit that CPR goal. If you're somewhere in the middle and you are getting purchases but they're not profitable, or maybe you're getting some purchases but you want to experiment and see if you could get more if you were more efficient with your budget, and maybe being maybe spend isn't as important to you, then you want to go with somewhere between here, something like have highest volume and test CPR goals, or maybe swap between the two and move from highest volume to CPR goals, see if it works, and if it doesn't, move back. If it does, happy days. So the important thing to remember is that this is all going to vary depending on the situation you're in, and the most appropriate one for you is perhaps not the most appropriate one for someone else. And remember, these are all tools to do a certain job, and whether that job is spend as much money as possible. I've certainly worked on accounts where they have said to me, I've worked on accounts where they've said to me, we need to spend 600,000 in the next 6 weeks. Okay, I can't use cost per result goal. I can't use bid cap there. If I do use them, they are going to be 1% or 2% of my overall spend. I'm going to have to rely on highest volume to get the job done. Yeah, I'm going to have to kind of expand into different campaigns to get the job done. And so highest volume is an absolute best friend there. I also had an account where they said to me, oh, we want to move from 75,000 a month spend to 125,000 a month spend. Again, I could use CPR goal and bid cap, but I can't use them on their own. They're not going to make up enough of the spend. I need to unlock highest volume. I need to unshackle myself there. I've also had clients who have said, we're getting so many results right now, but the problem is that they're not profitable. Okay, well, in that scenario, I need to try CPR goal. Yeah, we're getting 500 results a week, but we need to either dial back our spend or experiment with a bid strategy to try and get more cost-effective results. Okay, that's a scenario where I need to experiment with CPR goal or maybe bid cap. You start to see how bid cap is a very extreme method of trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve with CPR goal. Okay, so that's going to be my discussion over.